It's my dad. 3 words, barely a whisper. But they hit Colt Harper like a freight train at full speed. He looked down at the little girl soaked to the bone, shaking her left eye swollen shut, blood drying at the corner of her mouth, and something inside the biggest, most feared man in Amarillo, Texas, quietly broke in half. He had ridden through storms. He had buried brothers. He had stared down the barrel of a gun without flinching. But nothing had ever prepared him for this moment. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and follow along until the very last word. Drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. The rain had been hammering Amarillo for 3 hours straight when the door to Mel's Diner swung open and let in the kind of cold that gets into your bones and doesn't leave. Colt Grizzly Harper didn't look up right away. He was on his second cup of black coffee, his third cigarette dying in the ashtray beside him, and he was in the middle of losing a card game to Jimmy Two-Finger Reeves, who was absolutely cheating, but doing it so badly that calling him out felt like kicking a dog. The rest of the crew, 6 of them total, all patched Hell's Angels, all road-worn and loud, were spread across 2 booths near the window, arguing about something stupid. Gas prices, fantasy football. Whether or not Hank's new bike was faster than Grizzly's. The usual noise. Then the door opened and the noise stopped, not gradually, not one by one. All at once, like someone had reached over and turned the volume knob all the way to 0. Grizzly looked up. She was standing in the doorway. A little girl, couldn't have been more than 9 or 10 years old, wearing a torn yellow raincoat that had probably been bright once but was now the color of old mustard. Her dark hair was plastered flat against her face. Her shoes, one of them was missing its sole, flopping open like a broken hone, were soaked black. She was holding her left side with both arms crossed tight over her ribs, the way you hold yourself when something inside hurts too much to leave unguarded. Her right eye was nearly swollen shut. Her lip was split. There was a bruise along her jaw that was already going purple, the kind that takes a real deliberate hit to leave on a child's face. She stood there, not moving, not speaking, just staring at the room full of bikers, like she wasn't sure if she'd walked into safety or something worse. Danny, the waitress, a big-hearted woman in her 50s who had worked this diner for 22 years and seen nearly everything this town had to offer, was behind the counter with a coffee pot in her hand. Grizzly watched her face go from casual to something that looked like recognition, and the coffee pot slipped from her fingers and hit the tile floor with a crack like a gunshot. Nobody moved. The girl flinched at the sound. Hard. She pulled herself so smaller, her shoulders going up around her ears, her whole body bracing the instinctive trained flinch of a child who had learned that sudden loud sounds were followed by pain. That flinch was the thing that got Grizzly out of his seat. He wasn't a small man. He was 6'4", 260 pounds, with a beard that hadn't seen a trimmer in 2 years, and tattoos that ran from his knuckles to his collarbone. When Colt Harper stood up in a room, people noticed. When he walked toward you, it was a statement. He kept his hands visible. He kept his voice low. He crouched down about 3 feet from her, making himself smaller, bringing himself to her level so she wasn't looking up at a wall of leather and ink. "Hey," he said, "just that, hey." She looked at him. Her one open eye was brown, dark, deep brown, and it was full of something he recognized from a long time ago when he used to see it in a mirror. Not just fear, calculation. She was deciding something, whether he was safe, whether she should run. "What's your name?" he asked. She pressed her lips together, said nothing. "That's okay," he said. "You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me anything. But I need you to know that nobody in this room is going to hurt you. Not one person." He glanced back at the crew without turning his full body, just a look. And every one of them, Jimmy, Hank, Rope, Carver, and Dutch, sat very still and very quiet, because Grizzly's look had said what his voice hadn't. "Don't move. Don't speak. Let me work." He turned back to the girl. "Can you tell me what happened to you?" She opened her mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. "Who did this to you?" he asked softer. And she said it, barely loud enough to hear over the rain still battering the windows behind her. "It's my dad." Grizzly felt the words land somewhere deep in his chest, in a place he kept locked, and he felt the lock strain. He didn't let his face change. He had long ago learned to control his face because, in his world, showing what you felt was giving someone a weapon. But inside, it was like something old and very heavy had shifted. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, come sit down. We're going to get you warm and we're going to figure this out. Right? She didn't move immediately. She looked at the door behind her, calculating distances, exits. He could see it the way a child who has lived in fear learns to always know where the nearest way out is. I'm not going to let anyone take you anywhere you don't want to go, he said. That's a promise. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she took a step toward him. That one small trembling step cost her something. He could see it. It cost her trust she probably didn't have much of left to spend, and she spent it on him anyway. He stood up slowly and walked beside her to the nearest booth, the one farthest from the windows, farthest from the door, tucked into the corner, where she could have her back to the wall and see everything coming. He gestured to the seat, and she slid into it, still holding her ribs, still watching him. Grizzly nodded to Danny without speaking. Danny was already moving, already pulling a clean dish towel from the counter and wrapping it around a handful of ice from the machine. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her face was composed, professional, the face of a woman who had decided that falling apart was not an option right now. She set the ice packet on the table in front of the girl gently, and then she looked at Grizzly, and something passed between them. Something wordless, something urgent, and she turned away before the girl could see that her eyes were wet. Grizzly sat across from the child. He folded his big, scarred hands on the table in front of him, like he was trying to make them look less threatening. It probably wasn't working, but he was trying. What's your name? He asked again. No pressure, just conversation. She looked at his hands, then at his face, then back at his hands. Lily, she said. Lily. He repeated it like it was something fragile. That's a good name. I'm Colt. Most people call me Grizzly, but you can call me whatever you want. A beat. Or nothing. You don't have to call me anything. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but the shadow of one. Gone almost before it arrived. How old are you, Lily? 9. 9 years old. She was 9 years old, and she had walked through a storm in a broken shoe, with a split lip and a bruised face and cracked ribs, and she had pushed open the door to a diner full of bikers because wherever she was, it had been worse than this. That thought settled into Grizzly's mind like a stone, dropping into still water, and the ripples moved outward slowly. How far did you walk? He asked. She shook her head slightly. I don't know, a long time. From home, a pause. Something complicated moved behind her open eye. She stopped, started again. From his house, not my house, not home. His house, even in 9-year-old language, she had already made the distinction, already separated herself from that place. He hurt you tonight, Grizzly said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Has he hurt you before? The way she looked at him, then with that one dark, exhausted eye, told him everything. It said, this is not a new thing. This is a very old thing. This is all I have ever known. She said quietly, he said if I told anyone he'd... She stopped, pressed her lips together hard. You don't have to say it, Grizzly said. He said he'd kill me, she finished, like she was stating a weather report, like she had heard it enough times that the words had lost their horror and become just a fact of her world. Behind him, Grizzly heard one of his crew shift in their booth. He heard Jimmy let out a breath through his teeth, slow controlled the breath of a man keeping something down. Grizzly kept his eyes on Lily. But you came out anyway, he said. She looked at him. He wasn't going to stop. He never stops. So I thought. She looked at her hands on the table, small and raw-knuckled. Thought I'd rather be dead out there than dead in there. The diner was absolutely silent. Grizzly reached across the table slowly, visibly giving her every chance to pull back, and he placed one large hand over both of hers. Just resting there, not grabbing, not holding, just present. You're not going to be dead anywhere, he said. You hear me? Not tonight, not on my watch. She stared at his hand for a moment. Then she turned her hands over both of them, and she held on. It was the smallest thing. It was the size of the whole world. Danny was back at the counter talking quietly into the phone. Her voice was low controlled, but her jaw was tight, and her words were clipped with something that was trying very hard not to be rage. Grizzly caught fragments. Child. Yes, I'm telling you, she's here right now. She needs, no, you. Listen to me, Gerald. You send someone down here right now, or so help me. God, Jimmy Reeves slid quietly out of his booth and came to stand at Grizzly's shoulder. He was 40 years old, smaller than Grizzly by half a foot, with a face like a weather-beaten road map and eyes that had seen the worst of people and chosen stubbornly and repeatedly to still believe in the best of them. "How bad?" he said under his breath. "Ribs, probably," Grizzly said just as quietly. "Eye, jaw, I don't know what else." Jimmy's jaw worked. "The father?" "Yeah. Where is he now?" "I don't know," Grizzly said. And that right there was the thing that sat cold and wrong in the back of his mind, because a man like that, a man who had done this to a 9-year-old girl and then watched her walk out into a storm, might be anywhere, might already be looking, might be closer than any of them knew. "We need to know where he is," Grizzly said. Jimmy nodded once and went back to the booth where Grizzly could hear him talking low and fast to Hank and Rope. Grizzly turned back to Lily. She had taken the ice pack from the table and was holding it against her face, her expression tired and flat, and oddly adult, the expression of someone who had been through this particular thing, being hurt, and then waiting for the hurt to settle many times before. "Lily," Grizzly said, "your dad does. He know where you are right now." She thought about it. "I don't think so. I went out the back, through the field. He was..." A pause. "He was drinking. He gets slower when he drinks." "Does he have a car?" "Yeah, a truck." "What color?" "Red, old red. It has a crack in the windshield." Grizzly didn't turn around. "Carver," he said. From the booth behind him, Carver's voice came back immediately. "Already on it." Lily looked past Grizzly at the source of the voice, then back at him. "What are they doing at making sure?" Grizzly said simply. She studied him. "You're not going to call the police, are you?" He hesitated. Not because he was lying, because it was complicated. "Danny is doing that right now," he said carefully. "But that's not the only thing we're doing." Her face changed. Not fear exactly, she'd already been afraid, that wasn't news, but something more specific, a particular kind of dread. "The police don't help," she said. Her voice had dropped to nearly nothing. "They came before, 2 times. My dad, he talks to them different than he talks to me. He's nice to them. He cries sometimes. He tells them I fall down a lot." A beat. They believed him. The words landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. Danny had hung up the phone and was standing very still behind the counter, and Grizzly didn't have to look at her to know her expression. He could feel it. "Who's the officer that came before?" Grizzly asked. Lily said the name without hesitation. "Sheriff Caldwell." There was a sound from the back booth. It was Dutch, who was 54 years old and had grown up in Amarillo and knew every name worth knowing in this county, and the sound he made was quiet and very specific. It was the sound of a piece clicking into place. "Grizzly," Dutch said. "I know," Grizzly said. He did know. He knew the name. He knew the history attached to the name. He knew what it meant that this child had gone to the law twice and been returned to a man who smiled at badges and then came home and used his hands on a 9-year-old. He looked at Lily. She was watching him with that one open eye, steady and exhausted, and waiting to be disappointed again. "Listen to me," Grizzly said. His voice was very quiet and very certain. "I'm not going to tell you that everything is fixed. I'm not going to make you a promise I'm not sure I can keep. But I will tell you them." He leaned forward slightly. "You walked in that door tonight. You came in here. You made the right call. And we are not going to let anyone take you back to that house. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Not ever. That is the one promise I am absolutely, completely sure I can keep." She looked at him for a long time. "How come," she finally said, it was such a simple question. "How come, why would you, a stranger, a biker, a man with tattoos and a club patch, how come you would do that?" And Grizzly, who did not talk about himself, who had not talked about certain things in 28 years, opened his mouth. "Because when I was a little older than you," he said, "there was nobody in the room when I needed them. And I promised myself," he stopped, started again. "I promised myself that if I was ever in the room, I wasn't going to be nobody." Lily looked at him. Something shifted in her face. Something very young and very old at the same time. "Did your dad?" she started. "Yeah," he said. She nodded. Like that explained everything. Like that was enough. Outside, the rain was still hammering the roof of Mel's diner. Inside, the crew had gone quiet and purposeful, the specific kind of quiet that Grizzly recognized as his people doing what his people did, which was organize, plan, and prepare for the thing that was coming, because they all knew without anyone saying it that the thing was coming. Danny set a mug of hot chocolate on the table in front of Lily, then a plate with 2 pieces of toast and a small cup of grape jelly. She didn't say anything. She just set them down and stepped back. Lily looked at the food. Something happened to her face. Something broke open just slightly, just for a second before she locked it back down. She reached out and picked up the mug with both hands. "Thank you," she said. "Of course, baby," Danny said, and she turned away fast and went back to the counter and stood there with her back to the room and her shoulders working hard against something she was fighting off. Grizzly watched Lily wrap both hands around the mug, watched the steam rise between her fingers, watched her take a small, careful sip, and then the bell above the diner door rang. The door opened, and the room changed. It didn't change slowly. It changed the way rooms change when the wrong person walks into them, immediately, completely, like all the air had been replaced with something else. The man who stepped into it was large. Not grizzly large, different large, thick through the middle, flushed in the face. His flannel shirt was soaked through and his boots were tracked with mud, and his eyes moved around the room in the fast hunting way of a man who was drunk and certain and looking for something specific. They found Lily, and he smiled. It was the worst kind of smile, the kind that said, "Found you." "There she is," Kyle Bennett said. His voice was too loud for the room and not nearly loud enough for what it was trying to be. "There's my girl." Lily's hands went rigid around the mug. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She went completely, utterly still. The stillness of a child who has learned that stillness is the safest thing, that moving draws attention, that small and quiet and invisible is the best armor available. And Colt Harper stood up. He put himself between Kyle Bennett and the booth where Lily sat. He didn't say anything yet. He just stood there. All 6'4" of him, all 260 pounds, in his cut, his patch, his boots that had put miles on every kind of road this country had. Kyle Bennett looked at him, and for just a second, just the flash of 1 second, something moved through Kyle's eyes that was not quite confidence. Then he reset his face and puffed up his chest and said, "That's my daughter. You step aside." "No," Grizzly said. One word. Flat. Final. Kyle's face went red. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said, his voice dropping into something threatening, and practiced the voice of a man who had used intimidation so many times it had become his first language. "That girl is mine, and you've got no right." "She walked in here," Grizzly said, "bloody and alone in a storm, a 9-year-old girl." "You want to explain that to me?" "She falls down," Kyle said, and the words came out too quickly, too practiced, too smooth. "She's clumsy. She was upset tonight, and she ran off, and I've been looking all over for her." He spread his hands. Reasonable, calm, the version of himself he showed to police. "I just want to take my daughter home." "She's not going anywhere with you," Grizzly said. Kyle's composure cracked. "You can't keep her from me. I'm her father. I've got rights." "What you've got," Jimmy Reeves said from somewhere behind Grizzly, his voice very quiet and very clear, "is about 30 seconds to turn around and walk back out that door before this conversation becomes something else." Kyle looked past Grizzly's shoulder at Jimmy, then at Hank, then at Rope and Carver, who had both gotten up from their booth and were standing in a loose line that very much was not accidental. The math of the room was not in Kyle Bennett's favor. But drunk men do not always do math. His hand went to his belt, and everything in the diner went absolutely crystalline still. His fingers touched the handle of a knife that sat in a leather sheath on his right hip. He didn't draw it, he just touched it. Just let everyone in the room see that his hand was there, and his hand was steady, and he was not in his estimation finished. "I will take my daughter home," he said, "and then I will come back for each and every one of you." Grizzly looked at the hand on the knife. Then he looked at Kyle Bennett's face. And something happened inside Colt Harper, something quiet and absolute and very old, and his voice when it came was almost gentle. "Kyle," he said, "I grew up in a house like the one you run. I know exactly what kind of man you are. And I am telling you, as someone who has been on the other side of it, who has lived to be standing in this room right now, that you have made the last choice you're going to make that has no consequence. From here on out, everything you do is going to cost you something. Kyle stared at him. Walk away, Grizzly said. Right now, walk away and we can let this night be the night everything changed. Or don't. And we can let this night be the night everything ended. The rain hammered the roof. The wind pushed against the windows. Kyle Bennett's hand moved on the knife handle. And outside on the wet street in front of Mel's diner, a set of headlights swept across the window, and the red and blue of a sheriff's cruiser pulsed against the rain. Kyle saw the lights. His hand went still. His face went through something complicated. Anger, calculation, fear, the specific fear of a man whose version of events depended on witnesses, and then slowly he lowered his hand. He stepped back. He looked past Grizzly one more time at the booth where Lily sat. She was looking at him, not hiding, not flinching, looking at him with that one open eye, and whatever he saw in her face made something move across his own, something that might have been shame in a different man, in a different life. This isn't over, he said. No, Grizzly agreed, it isn't. And Kyle Bennett turned and walked out the door. The bell above it rang once. The room exhaled. And from the booth behind Grizzly, a small, steady voice said, He's going to come back. He always comes back. Grizzly turned around. Lily was sitting straight up in the booth, her hands flat on the table, the mug of hot chocolate still steaming between them. She was looking at the door. Her face was not the face of a child who had just been rescued. It was the face of a child who had been here before the moment of apparent safety that doesn't hold, and who knew with terrible certainty exactly what came next. She was right. And somewhere in the parking lot of Mel's diner in the dark, in the rain behind the blinking lights of a sheriff's cruiser, Kyle Bennett was standing in the wet, breathing hard, his hand still resting on the knife at his hip, thinking exactly the same thing. He always came back. Sheriff Gerald Caldwell was 61 years old, and he had the particular kind of tired that doesn't come from not sleeping enough. It comes from sleeping just fine while the wrong things happen on your watch. He walked into Mel's diner with his hat in his hand and rain on his shoulders, and that tired sitting right there on his face where everyone could see it, and Grizzly took one look at me and understood immediately that this man already knew more than he was pretending not to know. Got a call about a disturbance, Caldwell said, his eyes moving around the room the way cop eyes always move, cataloging, assessing, looking for the shape of the situation before committing to a version of it. They landed on Lily, stayed there. Something moved through his face fast like a cloud crossing the sun. Then it was gone and his expression was professional again. Is this the child? Her name is Lily, Grizzly said. His voice was even. Her last name is Bennett. Caldwell's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly, but Grizzly caught it. I know who she is, the sheriff said. Do you? Grizzly said. Not a question. Danny set her rag down on the counter and turned around. Her voice was tight and perfectly controlled. Gerald, I called you 40 minutes ago. 40 minutes. This child walked in here looking like she'd been through a car windshield, and it took you 40 minutes to come down here, and I'd really love to hear your explanation for that. I came as fast as I... Kyle Bennett was in this diner 10 minutes ago, Grizzly said. He had his hand on a knife. He threatened everyone in this room, and he walked out that door and got in his truck and left. You passed him on the way in. Did you stop him? Caldwell's chin came up. I didn't see his vehicle. Red truck, Grizzly said. Old, cracked windshield. You didn't see it. I said I didn't see it. The two men looked at each other across the length of the diner, and the silence between them had weight and history and the specific texture of a conversation that had been coming for a long time. Lily's voice cut through it, small and matter-of-fact. He's lying. Every head turned toward her. She was sitting in the booth with her hands flat on the table, looking at the sheriff with her one open eye, and she said it again. The same way now, not accusatory, not angry, just stating a fact she had known for a longest time and had decided tonight she was done pretending not to know. He's lying. Sheriff Caldwell knows my dad. They went to school together. My dad told me. He said the sheriff was his friend. He said that's why nothing would ever happen. She paused. He said it like it was funny. The room was absolutely still. Danny made a sound that was not quite a word. Caldwell's face went through something complicated. He opened his mouth, closed it. He looked at Lily, and this time the professional mask slipped fully, and what was underneath it was not malice. It was something more ordinary and more damning. It was guilt. Plain, heavy, long-carried guilt. Lily, he started, his voice softer now. You came to our house, she said, twice. My dad was crying the second time. Fake crying. I watched from the stairs. You hugged him. You told him it was going to be okay. She looked at the table. You didn't look for me. The words hit the room like stones, dropped into water, each one making its own ripple. I didn't know, Caldwell began. You knew. It was Grizzly. His voice was quiet and absolutely certain. You knew, or you chose not to look hard enough to find out. In this town at your age, with your history, with this man, you knew. Caldwell put his hat on the counter. He ran one hand over his face. He was quiet for a long moment, and in that quiet the rain kept hitting the windows, and the fluorescent lights above them hummed their small, steady hum, and every person in the room waited. What do you want from me? Caldwell finally said. I want a temporary protection order, Grizzly said. Tonight, right now. On paper sign, so that if Kyle Bennett comes back to this diner or goes within 100 yards of this child, he is in violation of a legal order and you have to act on it whether you want to or not. Grizzly, can you do that or can't you? Caldwell looked at Lily again. She was still looking at the table. She had gone very quiet, the way she went quiet when things were being decided about her. The practiced stillness of a child who had learned that the best thing she could do in adult conversations was disappear. I can draw one up, Caldwell said slowly. Temporary, 48 hours. It buys time for CPS too. CPS has had years, Danny said from behind the counter, and now her voice was not controlled anymore. Don't you stand there and talk to me about CPS, Gerald. This baby has been in that house her whole life, and CPS has had years. Danny. No. Her voice cracked and she straightened up and she met his eyes and she didn't look away. No. You do not get to come in here and be reasonable about this. She walked in here with a closed eye and broken ribs, and she's 9 years old. 9, you do the right thing right now, Gerald, tonight, or I will spend whatever time I have left on this earth making sure everyone in this county knows exactly what you didn't do when you had the chance. The silence after that was enormous. Caldwell picked up his hat. He looked at Lily one more time. I'll write the order in my car, he said. Give me 15 minutes. He walked out. The bell above the door rang. Jimmy Reeves let out a long breath. Think he actually does it. He does it, Grizzly said. He's scared enough to do it. Scared of you, Jimmy asked. Scared of her, Grizzly said and nodded toward Lily. Jimmy looked at the child in the booth, looked at Grizzly. Something moved through his face that might have been awe. Lily had lifted her head. She was looking at Grizzly. What's CPS, Child Protective Services, Grizzly said. They're the people who are supposed to make sure kids are safe. Are they going to take me somewhere? We're working on that. I don't want to go somewhere, she said. Her voice was controlled, but her hands had tightened on the edge of the table. Last time, after the second time the police came, someone from an office called, and my dad answered the phone, and he told them everything was fine, and she believed him, and she didn't even ask to talk to me. She just believed him. She swallowed hard. I was right there. I was right there in the room. Grizzly sat back down across from her. He folded his hands on the table. He looked at her, steady. That is not going to happen this time. How do you know? Because this time you walked out. You made it to somewhere else. And that changes what they can do. You're not in that house anymore, Lily. You're here. And there are 7 people in this room who saw you walk in, and there are going to be 7 people in this room swearing to what you look like. And that's not something your dad can talk his way around. She processed that. He could see her doing it, the careful internal checking of whether the logic held, whether this was something she could trust, or another version of something that was going to collapse the moment she leaned on it. What if he calls someone, she said. He knows people. He always says he knows people. So do I, Grizzly said simply. From the back booth, Dutch cleared his throat. Grizzly got something. Grizzly turned. Dutch was sitting with his phone face up on the table and his expression had changed. Dutch was a man who did not rattle easily, 54 years on this earth, and most of them rough had given him a particular kind of steadiness. But right now, Dutch looked rattled. "Talk to me," Grizzly said. Dutch looked at Lily for a moment, just a beat, and Grizzly understood the look. He got up from the booth and walked to the back, and Dutch lowered his voice. "Carver did some driving," Dutch said. "Kyle's truck isn't on the road toward home. It's parked 2 blocks over. Engine's running." Grizzly was still. "He didn't leave," Dutch said. "He's sitting 2 blocks from here in a running truck, waiting." "For what?" "For Caldwell to leave," Dutch said. "My guess." Grizzly turned that over. Kyle Bennett, drunk and furious and denied, sitting 2 blocks away in a running truck. Not going home, not going to calm down, waiting for the moment when the official presence drove away and it was just a diner full of bikers with no legal authority and 1 9-year-old girl. "How many?" Grizzly said. Dutch shook his head. "Carver only saw the 1 truck, but Kyle made a phone call before he parked. Couple minutes long." Grizzly looked at the front windows of the diner at the rain-blurred dark beyond them and recalculated everything. "Pull Carver back in," he said. "I don't want him out there alone." Dutch nodded and picked up his phone. Grizzly walked back to Lily's booth. She was watching him come, reading his face with the particular attention of a child who had learned early that adult faces were maps, that the real information was not in what people said, but in what moved behind their eyes when they thought you weren't looking. "What is it?" she said. He could have lied. He had lied to children before. Protective lies, kindness, lies the kind that buy time and buy comfort. But looking at Lily Bennett, at this specific child who had survived this specific life, he understood that she had heard enough lies to know the texture of them, and that a lie from him now would cost more than the truth. "Your dad is still nearby," he said. "He didn't leave." She closed her eyes. Just for a second, then she opened them again and she was steady. "Okay," she said. Just okay, like she had already factored this into her calculations. Like this was the version of events she had already prepared for. "Are you scared?" he asked. She thought about it. "Not of him," she said. "I'm scared that it doesn't work. That all of this," she gestured a small motion that took in the diner, the bikers, Danny, all of it, "doesn't actually change anything. That I end up back there anyway." "That's a reasonable thing to be scared of," Grizzly said. She blinked, like she hadn't expected that. Like she had been braced for reassurance, for the adult version of "it's going to be fine," and he had said something else instead. "But it's not going to happen that way," he said. "I want to be honest with you about what's hard about tonight. Because you deserve that. You're not a little kid who needs to be protected from the truth of what's happening. You've been living in the truth of it for 9 years. What I'm telling you is the hard part is real, and we're handling it. Both things are true at the same time." She stared at him. "Nobody ever talked to me like that before," she said. "Like what?" "Like I was a real person." The words hit him somewhere old and specific. The bell above the door rang. Carver came back in, and right behind him came a man none of them had seen before, mid-40s, heavy-set, wearing a rain jacket with a logo on the chest. He had the look of a man who had been pulled from somewhere warm and was not happy about it, but was trying to cover that with professional composure. He held up a badge wallet as he came through the door. "Name's Marsh," he said. "I'm with the county DA's office. I got a call about 20 minutes ago from an attorney in Amarillo who says she has a client." He looked around the room. "Somewhere in here a minor who may have grounds for an emergency protective hearing first thing tomorrow morning." Everyone in the room turned to look at Grizzly. Grizzly had not made that call. He looked at Dutch. Dutch spread his hands. "Wasn't me." He looked at Jimmy. Jimmy shook his head. He looked at Danny. Danny, behind the counter, picked up her dish rag and started wiping the counter with great concentration. "I may have made one more call after I called Gerald," she said to the counter surface. "I may have called my daughter-in-law, who is an attorney." "Danny," Grizzly said. "She's very good," Danny said, still not looking up. "She did her whole law degree in 3 years. Top of her class." Marsh looked from the bikers to the waitress to the child in the booth and back. "Are you," he looked at Grizzly, "the one who found her?" "She found us," Grizzly said. Marsh looked at Lily. His professional composure softened very slightly. "Can I sit down?" Lily looked at Grizzly. Grizzly gave a small nod. She looked back at Marsh and nodded. Marsh sat down across from her in the spot Grizzly vacated, and he put a small notebook on the table and he spoke quietly and directly. Lily, my name is Tom Marsh. I work for the county, and my job is to make sure that when children are in dangerous situations, the law actually does what it's supposed to do, not what it's been doing, what it's supposed to do. Do you understand the difference? She said, yeah, it's supposed to protect me. It hasn't been. Marsh wrote something down. I want to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. But anything you tell me tonight goes into a report that becomes part of a legal record, and that record is a lot harder for people to ignore than a phone call or a home visit. Does that make sense? It means it's on paper, she said. Exactly. My dad's really good at talking to people, she said. He's really good at making people think he's fine. But he can't change the paper, right? If it's written down, he can't change it. No, Marsh said quietly. He can't change it. She straightened up. She put both hands flat on the table. Okay, she said. What do you want to know? And she started talking. She talked with the careful, specific precision of a child who had spent years watching and remembering, because memory was the only thing that was entirely hers, that he couldn't take, couldn't damage, couldn't explain away. She talked about dates she remembered by what happened on them. She talked about the hospital visit when she was 6, that was documented as a fall off a bicycle, and about how there was no bicycle. She talked about the teacher in 2nd grade who had asked her about a bruise, and she had said what her father told her to say, and the teacher had let it go, and she had gone home that night and stood in the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror and decided something, that she was going to remember every single thing in case someday the remembering mattered. Tonight it mattered. Marsh was writing steadily, his face composed, his pen moving without stopping. Grizzly stood against the wall with his arms folded and his jaw tight, and he listened to a 9-year-old child give a complete and precise accounting of years of abuse to a man from the DA's office in a diner at 11:30 at night, and every word she said felt like something that should not have had to be said, something that should have been stopped long before it had to be documented. Jimmy was beside him. Neither of them spoke. After a while, Jimmy said very quietly, "She's something." "Yeah," Grizzly said. "Reminds me of somebody." "Don't," Grizzly said. Jimmy was quiet for a moment. "Okay," he said, "but she does." Grizzly didn't answer because Jimmy was right, and they both knew it. At 12:14 in the morning, the door opened and Sheriff Caldwell came back in. He was holding a folder. His face was different than when he had walked out. The professional distance was gone, and what was left looked rawer and older and somehow smaller. He walked to the booth where Marsh and Lily were sitting. He placed the folder on the table. "Temporary protection order," he said. "Signed. Kyle Bennett cannot approach Lily or this location. If he does, he's in violation and subject to immediate arrest." He paused. "I also called the state child welfare line, not the county, the state. Filed a report directly." Another pause longer. "I should have done that a long time ago." Nobody in the room said anything. Lily looked at the folder on the table. She didn't pick it up. She just looked at it. "Does this mean he can't come in here?" she said. "If he does," Caldwell said, "I will personally arrest him." She looked up at the sheriff. "You promise?" Caldwell met her eyes. And something in him, something that had been locked down by years of convenience and friendship, and looking the other way, visibly cracked. "I promise," he said. And right then, as if the moment had been scripted by something with a very dark sense of timing, Dutch stood up fast from the back booth, his phone in his hand, his face gone tight. "Grizzly." Everyone turned. "Carver's outside," Dutch said. "He just texted. Kyle's truck moved. It's not parked anymore." The room shifted. Everybody in it recalibrated. "Where is it?" Grizzly said. Dutch looked at his phone, then up. "It's pulling into the parking lot right now." And outside, through the rain-blurred front windows, headlights swept across the glass, and this time they were not alone. Behind the red truck, 2 more sets of headlights pulled in. 3 vehicles total, engines running, nobody getting out yet, just sitting there in the wet, dark headlights, unpointed at the diner. Lily had seen it. She was looking at the windows, and her face was absolutely still, and she said quietly to no one in particular, "He called people." "He did," Grizzly said. She turned to look at him, and this time her voice, when it came, did not have the flatness of exhaustion or the careful control of a child managing her own fear. This time it broke just slightly, just at the edges, just enough to show what was underneath. And what was underneath was a 9-year-old girl who was very, very tired. "I don't want to go back," she said. "Please. I know I keep saying it, but I need you to know that I mean it. I will do anything. I'll tell them everything. I'll sign whatever they need. Please don't let them take me back there." Grizzly looked at her. He felt the weight of it. The full weight of this child this night, this diner, those headlights in the parking lot, and every choice that had led every person in this room to exactly this moment. He turned to Caldwell. "You've got a protection order." "Yes." "Then do your job," Grizzly said. "Right now, tonight. Go out there and do your job." Caldwell picked up his hat. He looked at it. He put it on. And for the first time in a long time, Sheriff Gerald Caldwell walked towards something instead of away from it. Caldwell walked out that door, and nobody in the diner breathed. Grizzly stood at the window, not close enough to be seen, just close enough to watch. And he kept his face neutral, because Lily was watching his face and reading it the way she read everything, with that careful, exhausted precision that shouldn't belong to a 9-year-old and did anyway. Outside, Caldwell crossed the parking lot with his hand on his belt, not on his weapon, just resting there, the body language of a man who was trying to project authority he wasn't entirely sure he still had. The red truck's window rolled down. Kyle's arm came out, just the arm resting on the door, casual, like a man waiting for a drive-through order. Even from inside the diner, through glass and rain, Grizzly could read the performance of it. Kyle Bennett had spent years practicing the version of himself that looked reasonable. That looked like the wrong party. That looked like a confused father just trying to find his little girl. "What's he doing?" Jimmy said from beside him. "Talking," Grizzly said. "Buying time. Figuring out what Caldwell will do." "What will Caldwell do?" Grizzly watched the sheriff's shoulders, watched the set of them, the angle, the way a man's spine either holds or doesn't when the moment gets real. "I think," he said slowly, "he's going to do the right thing, not because he's a good man, because he's scared enough of the wrong thing to do the right one." "That's a hell of a way to get justice," Jimmy said. "It's the most common way," Grizzly said. Behind them, Lily said, "Is he arresting him?" "Not yet," Grizzly said without turning. "Talking first." "My dad's really good at talking," she said again. It came out flat, and certain the specific flatness of a child who had watched the same scene play out enough times to know the script. Grizzly turned from the window and looked at her. "So is Caldwell," he said. "And Caldwell's got paper." She looked at the folder still sitting on the table. She reached out and touched the edge of it, just one finger, the way you touch something you're not sure you're allowed to have. "Can I hold it?" she said. Danny, who had come around the counter without anyone noticing, sat down in the booth across from Lily and slid the folder toward her gently. "It's yours, baby," she said. "That paper has your name on it. It belongs to you." Lily picked it up. She held it with both hands, and she looked at the text on it, and she didn't say anything for a moment, and then she said very quietly, "He really can't come in here. He comes through that door," Danny said, "and Caldwell has to arrest him. Has to. No choice, no conversation, no letting him explain. That paper makes it automatic." Lily looked at the paper. Something moved through her face, relief and disbelief, at the same time the complicated expression of a person who has wanted something for so long that getting it doesn't feel real yet. Then Dutch said Grizzly, and his voice had the tight, clipped quality that meant the situation outside had changed. Grizzly turned back to the window. The two vehicles behind Kyle's truck, the ones that had pulled in behind him, the ones that had told everyone in the diner exactly what kind of night this was going to be, had their doors open now. Men were getting out. Grizzly counted 3, then 4. Work boots flanneled the particular body language of men who had been drinking and had been called somewhere to do something and were feeling righteous about it. "Friends of Kyle's," Rope said from the back booth. He was already on his feet. "How many of us?" Grizzly said. 6, Jimmy said, plus Caldwell. "Oh, Caldwell's got a gun and a badge," Grizzly said. "That counts for more than one." He looked at his crew, Jimmy Dutch Rope, Hank Carver, and he did the math, and the math was not comfortable, but it was workable. "Nobody goes out there unless I say, clear," a round of nods. "What are you going to do?" Lily said. He looked at her. She was still holding the folder with both hands pressed flat against her chest, now like a shield. Her open eye was tracking everything. The window, the crew, his face, the door. She was scared, and she was not going to show it any more than she already had. And that particular combination, that specific stubbornness in the face of everything, did something to his chest that he didn't have a name for. "I'm going to go outside," he said. "Danny is going to stay here with you. Jimmy is going to stay here with you. Nobody is coming through that door. What if they try? Then we will have a very short, very clear conversation about why that's a bad idea," he said. She looked at him. She was calculating again. He could see it. And then she said something he did not expect. "Take the paper. Show them the paper first. Before anything else, show them the paper and make sure they see the date in the signature. My dad doesn't like things that are official. It scares him." Grizzly stared at her. A 9-year-old girl who had just handed him a tactical instruction based on 9 years of studying a violent man's psychology. He reached over and she held the folder out, and he took it. "Smart," he said. "He always tears up unofficial things," she said. "He ripped a letter from my school once, but he never touches official things. He's scared of them. He's scared of anything he can't make go away." Grizzly looked down at the folder in his hand. Then he looked at Dutch and jerked his chin toward the door. Dutch nodded. Hank and Rope fell in behind. Carver came last, pulling on his jacket. Jimmy stayed. He sat down across from Lily and Danny without being asked, and he put his forearms on the table and he looked at the child and said simply, "I'm not going anywhere." She looked at him. She seemed to be deciding something. Then she said, "What did you lose?" Jimmy blinked. "What?" Grizzly said, "You all lost things, that you made promises. What did you lose?" Jimmy was quiet for a beat. Then he said, "My sister, long time ago. She was about your age." He stopped. "Different situation, but not..." He cleared his throat. "Mom, that different." Lily looked at him steadily. "I'm sorry," she said. "Yeah," Jimmy said. "Me too." Outside, Grizzly pushed through the diner door and the rain hit him immediately, cold and hard and indifferent. He walked across the parking lot toward the knot of men gathering near Kyle's truck, and he held the folder at his side visible, and he kept his pace even because running communicated fear, and fear was not something he was going to give these people. Kyle saw him coming and straightened up from where he was leaning against his truck door. His 4 friends fanned out slightly, the loose, instinctive repositioning of men who had done this before, not professionally, but enough to be comfortable with the shape of a confrontation. Caldwell was still standing between them, and Grizzly could see the relief on the sheriff's face when he appeared, the relief of a man who had been alone in an uncomfortable place and was glad not to be anymore. "Kyle," Grizzly said. He stopped 10 feet from the truck. "I've got something I need you to look at." Kyle's chin came up. "I'm not looking at anything. I'm here to get my daughter and go home." Grizzly held up the folder. "This is a temporary protection order issued by Sheriff Caldwell 20 minutes ago. It's signed and dated. It says you cannot approach Lily or the premises of this diner." He kept his voice level and clear. "You are currently in the parking lot of this diner. That means you are currently in violation of this order, which means Caldwell has to arrest you right now, whether he wants to or not." Kyle stared at the folder. His face went through a fast, ugly series of expressions: surprise, rage, calculation, and Grizzly watched all of them and noted the specific one that Lily had described. The fear. She was right. It was there. Behind the fury, there was a particular flinch at the sight of something official and signed and real, something that could not be charmed or cried away. "That's not legal," Keel said. "Oh, man. You can't just..." "It's entirely legal," Marsh said. He had come out behind Grizzly, apparently, and Grizzly hadn't heard him, which surprised him. Marsh held up his own badge wallet. "Tom Marsh County DA's office. Mr. Bennett, I want to make sure you understand what's happening here. The order is valid. Your presence here is a violation. And in addition to the order, I have a statement from your daughter currently being entered into the county's legal record. A detailed statement. Names, dates, specific incidents going back several years." A pause. "She has a very good memory, your daughter." Something happened to Kyle's face at that. It was not rage this time. It was something different. Something that went deeper and moved slower, like something shifting underground. He looked at Marsh and he said nothing, and the silence where his response should have been was in its way a kind of confession. One of his friends, a thick man with a beard that came to his chest, said, "Kyle, man, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Kyle said, still looking at Marsh. "She's 9 years old. She doesn't know what she's saying. She makes things up. She's been doing it for years. She's got problems. Kyle, Caldwell said, and his voice, for the first time that night, had something in it that was not apology. "Stop talking." Kyle turned to him. "Gerald," I said, "stop." Caldwell stepped forward. He unclipped the handcuffs from his belt. His hands were not shaking, and Grizzly noted that specifically because he had not been sure 20 minutes ago that they wouldn't be. "Kyle Bennett, you're in violation of a protective order. Turn around." The four men behind Kyle went very still. Kyle looked at the handcuffs. He looked at Caldwell. He looked at Grizzly, and then he looked past all of them, past the diner windows, toward where the light was warmest, where the booth was visible from outside, where a small shape could just barely be seen sitting at the table. His expression changed. It changed into something that had nothing legal or tactical in it. It was raw and ugly, and it said, "This isn't over." "You're making a mistake," he said. "All of you. She's mine. She's my blood. You don't know what she's like. You don't know what I've had to deal with. You have no idea." "Turn around, Kyle," Caldwell said. Firm, final. Kyle turned around. The cuffs went on, and Grizzly stood in the parking lot in the rain, and he watched it happen, and he felt something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite relief. Something more complicated. Something that knew this was one night, in one arrest, in one piece of paper, and that none of those things individually were the same as safe. Not yet, not permanently. But they were real. They were done. They were something that could not be undone by a phone call or a smile or a practiced lie. Kyle's friends got back in their vehicles without a word. There was a moment, one specific moment, where the thick-bearded man met Grizzly's eyes across the parking lot, and Grizzly held the look, and the man looked away first and got in his truck and drove out of the lot slowly and did not come back. People who showed up for trouble they didn't start usually left early when the trouble got real. That was the thing about Kyle Bennett's kind of power. It depended entirely on other people's willingness to lend it to him. The moment the lending stopped, the power stopped. Grizzly went back inside. The bell rang. Lily looked up from the table. She looked at him. She looked at the folder he was still carrying. She looked at the door behind him. "Where is he?" she said. "In the back of Caldwell's cruiser," Grizzly said. She was quiet for a moment. "Then is he going to jail?" "Tonight he is." "What about tomorrow?" Grizzly sat down. He put the folder back on the table in front of her. He looked at her, and he did not give her the easy answer because she had already told him in her own way, by asking the right questions, by touching the folder, like it was something almost too good to be real, that she had been given the easy answer before and it had not held. "Tomorrow is harder," he said. "Tomorrow is lawyers and hearings and a system that doesn't always move the way it should. Tomorrow is a fight." He paused. "But you've got Marsh. You've got a record. You've got 7 witnesses and a signed order and a statement in the county system." He looked at her. "And you've still got us." She was quiet. The fluorescent light hummed above them. The rain outside had begun to ease just slightly, the way storms do not, because they're done, but because they're taking a breath. "What happens to me tonight?" she said. "Tonight," Danny said before Grizzly could answer, "you're staying right here until we figure out the right place for you to be. You're not going anywhere by yourself, and you're not going anywhere you don't know. And you're getting another hot chocolate because yours went cold, and that's not acceptable." Lily looked at Danny. Danny was already up and moving toward the counter. And the thing that happened to Lily's face then, the thing that moved through it in the moment when she thought nobody was watching, was not relief exactly, and not happiness exactly. It was something more fragile than either of those things. It was the expression of a child encountering, for possibly the first time, the specific feeling of being cared for without conditions, without a price attached, without something expected in return. She looked back down at the table fast before it could fully show. Grizzly pretended not to have seen it. Jimmy caught his eye across the table and looked away too, because Jimmy knew the same thing Grizzly knew, which was that some things were too private to witness directly, and you honored them by looking elsewhere. Marsh came in from outside, rain-damp, his notebook in hand. He sat down at the end of the booth, and he said, "I need to talk to you both about what happens at the hearing tomorrow." He looked at Grizzly. She'll need representation. Danny's daughter-in-law. I'll be there, said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. She was 32 years old, slight, with her mother's eyes and her mother's arm in a briefcase that looked like it had seen hard use and liked it. She was still wearing what she'd clearly been in when her mother called jeans and a sweater under a rain jacket, and she had the look of a person who had driven fast and was not apologetic about it. Rachel Okafor, she said, setting the briefcase on the nearest table and snapping it open with the practiced click of someone who did this constantly. Danny's my mother-in-law. I've been on the phone with the State Child Welfare Office for the last 40 minutes, and I filed for an emergency custody hearing for 9 a.m. tomorrow. She pulled a sheaf of papers from the briefcase. Mr. Marsh, I believe you have been building the evidentiary record on your end. Marsh blinked, then he smiled just slightly. I have. Good, because what I need from this room in the next hour is a signed affidavit from every adult who witnessed Kyle Bennett's behavior tonight, his violation of the protection order, and his presence in this parking lot after the order was issued. She looked at the bikers, all of them, taking stock. How many of you are willing to sign? A pause. Then Rope raised his hand. Then Hank. Then Carver and Dutch simultaneously. Then Jimmy without looking up from the table where he was still sitting across from Lily. Grizzly was already holding out his hand for the paperwork. Give me the pen, he said. Rachel looked at him. She handed him the pen. Something in her face was doing a rapid reassessment of the situation of this room, these people, what had happened here tonight. And she said quietly, my mother told me what you did. Your mother exaggerates, Grizzly said, and signed the first affidavit. She really doesn't, Rachel said. Lily was watching Rachel with an expression that was new, something that looked tentatively, cautiously like the beginning of trust in a specific direction. Like she was calculating whether this woman was real, whether the briefcase and the papers and the phone calls and the 9 a.m. hearing were real, whether all of it was going to hold the way it hadn't held before. Are you a good lawyer? She asked Rachel directly. Rachel looked at her. She didn't smile and she didn't perform confidence. She said, yes, I am. Are you going to fight for me? I'm going to fight for you like it's the only case I have, Rachel said. Because right now it is. Lily looked at her for a long, careful moment. The same look she had given Grizzly when he crouched down in the doorway. The same look she had given Marsh when he sat across from her. The look that measured, that checked, that tested the weight of the thing before committing to trust it. Then she nodded, once, decisive. Okay, she said. And outside, Sheriff Caldwell's cruiser pulled out of the parking lot with Kyle Bennett in the back seat, and the headlights swept across the diner window one last time, and then disappeared into the wet dark of the Amarillo night, and for the first time in several hours, the parking lot of Mel's Diner was empty of everything that threatened. But Grizzly, standing at the window watching the lights go, was not settled. Not yet. Because he had been in enough situations to know that the visible threat leaving was not the same as the threat being gone, and because something specific was sitting at the back of his mind that had been sitting there since Dutch mentioned Kyle's phone call, the 2-minute call, before he parked, before he sat and waited for Caldwell to leave. Who had he called? The 4 men in the parking lot had been drinking buddies, local, unorganized. They had left the moment the situation got official. They were not the kind of people you call in the first 2 minutes of a crisis. They were the kind of people you call after when you need backup for something dumb. Who do you call in the first 2 minutes? Grizzly turned from the window. Dutch, he said. Dutch looked up from where he was signing his affidavit. That phone call Kyle made, Grizzly said, before he came back. How long did you say it was? 2 minutes, give or take. And he called one number. Dutch nodded. Far as Carver could tell. Was it local? Dutch thought about it. Didn't check. Grizzly looked at Marsh. Is there any way to find out who Kyle called tonight? Marsh looked up. His expression shifted, not suspicion exactly, but the particular alertness of a man whose job had trained him to notice when a question meant something beyond its surface. With a warrant, yes. With probable cause and a judge who will act tonight, possibly. Wipe somebody. Grizzly looked at the room. At Lily, who was watching him again with those careful eyes. At Rachel, who had gone still over her briefcase. At Danny, who was setting down a fresh mug of hot chocolate and reading the change in the air the way she read every change in every room she'd ever worked in. Because 4 drunk guys from the neighborhood Grizzly said slowly, are not what you call in the first 2 minutes when your daughter walks out on you. They're what you call for backup. The first call is to someone who matters, someone who knows something, someone who has a stake. He looked at Lily. Lily, he said carefully, does your dad have a lawyer? She blinked. Yeah, he talks about him sometimes. When he's in a certain kind of mood. He says he's got a friend who makes problems go away. The room was very quiet. Does he have a name? Marsh said. Lily thought about it, her brow furrowed. He calls him by a nickname. Something. She paused. Slick. He calls him Slick. Marsh and Rachel looked at each other across the table. Something passed between them that Grizzly could not read, but could feel the specific current of two legal professionals recognizing a name. Without saying it, the kind of recognition that meant the name was already in a file somewhere, already attached to something already known and not clean. You know that name, Grizzly said. Rachel closed her briefcase, slowly, deliberately. She looked at Marsh. We need to make a call, she said. Right now, tonight. Agreed, Marsh said, already pulling out his phone. Lily watched them both. Her fingers had found the edge of the protection order folder again. That same small gesture holding onto the paper like a handhold on a wall. She looked at Grizzly. What does it mean, she said. He looked at her. He looked at the folder in her hands. He looked at the door at the empty parking lot beyond it, at the wet, dark street, where a cruiser had driven away carrying a man who, it was now becoming clear, had resources they hadn't fully accounted for yet. It means, Grizzly said carefully, that tonight was the beginning, not the end. She absorbed that. She looked down at the folder. Then she looked up. Okay, she said for what felt like the 100th time that night, and each time she said it, the word meant something slightly different. This time it meant, I know. I've always known nothing easy comes to me. Tell me what comes next, and I'll handle it. Grizzly had been around a long time. He had known hard people and soft people and broken people, and people who built themselves back from nothing so many times they'd lost count. He had known people who wore their strength loudly and people who carried it so quietly you didn't see it until the moment it was needed. He had never known anyone 9 years old who carried it the way this child did. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Here's what comes next, he said. You tell me everything you know about Slick. Lily thought about Slick the way she thought about everything carefully from the inside out, pulling details from a memory that had been trained by necessity to hold on to things other people let go. He came to the house 3 times, she said, always at night, always in a black car, not a truck, a car like a fancy one. He wore a suit. My dad always cleaned the house before he came, like really cleaned it, moving furniture, throwing things away. He was nervous when Slick came. My dad's never nervous. Not about anything, but Slick made him nervous. Marsh had stopped writing. He was just listening. Rachel was standing very still beside her briefcase, her phone in her hand and forgotten. What did he look like? Marsh said. Old, Lily said. Not as old as, oh. She glanced at Dutch, seemed to recalibrate. Older than most people. White hair, but not messy white, like on purpose. And he had a ring, a big one, gold, on his right hand. He shook my dad's hand once when I was on the stairs watching, and I saw the ring catch the light. She posted him. My dad told me to go to my room. He never told me to go to my room when other people came over. Just Slick. Rachel turned to Marsh. That's Warren Sloan, she said. Her voice was flat and certain. Has to be. Marsh pressed his lips together. Rachel. You know it is. Warren Sloan, Grizzly said. Who is Warren Sloan? Rachel and Marsh exchanged the look again. The wordless, legal conversation, and this time Grizzly put his hand flat on the table. Don't do that, he said. Not tonight, not in front of her. She told you everything she knows. You give us what we need to understand what we're dealing with. Rachel looked at him. She made a decision. Warren Sloan is a defense attorney, has been for 30 years. He operates out of Amarillo, but he has a reach across the whole county and into 2 neighboring ones. He specializes in making legal problems disappear before they become public problems. She paused. He has a relationship with 3 sitting judges. One of them is assigned to the family court docket. The silence in the diner landed hard. Danny set down the mug she was holding, carefully, like if she wasn't careful, she would throw it. The family court judge, Grizzly said slowly. Yes, Rachel said. The one who would hear the custody hearing tomorrow morning. Yes. So Kyle called Sloan from the parking lot, Grizzly said, and he was working through it as he spoke the pieces arranging themselves into a shape he didn't like. And Sloan is going to call the judge, and the judge is going to do what exactly? Throw out the protection order. Dismiss the hearing. Not throw out, Rachel said. Sloan's too careful for anything that direct. More likely delay. Reassign. Find a procedural reason to push the hearing back 48 hours, 72 hours. Give Kyle time to get out on bail, get organized, get his story straight. Give Sloan time to build a counter-narrative. Get a doctor somewhere to say Lily's injuries are consistent with a fall. Get a school counselor to say she's had behavioral issues. Build the version of events that makes Kyle the devoted father and us, she gestured around the room, the people who abducted his child. The word landed like a fist. Abducted. Lily said it before anyone else could. He'd say you kidnapped me. Yes, Rachel said. She didn't soften it. She had understood, watching this child for the past hour, that Lily Bennett did not need things softened. She needed them straight. That's the play. It's the one Sloan would run. You're not in your father's custody. You're in the custody of people with criminal records and club affiliations, and the longer tonight goes without an official placement, the easier it is for him to build that argument. So what do? Jimmy said. We need to move faster than Sloan, Rachel said. She was already opening her briefcase again. I need to file a motion tonight, not tomorrow morning, tonight, for emergency placement and an injunction that prevents any judge from reassigning this case without a public hearing. Which means I need a judge to sign off on it in the next, she checked her watch, 4 hours, before Sloan can make his calls and get his ducks in a row. Can you do that? Grizzly said. I know a judge, Rachel said. She's not in Sloan's pocket. She's also going to be very unhappy about being called at 1 a.m. A pause. She'll get over it. She picked up her phone and walked to the far end of the diner, where it was quieter, and Grizzly watched her go and felt the strange, specific sensation of a situation that had been one thing an hour ago becoming something else entirely, not bigger exactly, but deeper, more layered, the kind of problem that didn't end with one arrest in one parking lot on one rainy night. Lily was looking at him. He planned for this, she said. It was not a question. He always plans for this. Every time something bad happens at our house, every time a few days later something changes. The school I go to changes, or the neighbor who asks questions moves away, or the person at the church who was nice to me stops being there. I never understood why. I thought it was just bad luck. She looked at her hands. It wasn't bad luck. No, Grizzly said. It wasn't. He was moving pieces, she said. Grizzly nodded. She was quiet for a moment. Then how do you move pieces you can't see? He looked at her. You don't let him be the only one moving, he said. Marsh had his own phone out now and was talking in a low, rapid voice to someone who was clearly being woken up and was clearly not objecting. Dutch had gone back to his booth and was on his phone too, and Grizzly did not ask what Dutch was doing because Dutch, when given a problem of the information gathering variety, was better left to work without supervision. Dutch had a particular set of skills that had nothing to do with motorcycles and everything to do with the life that had been before the club considerably more complicated. Rope appeared at Grizzly's shoulder. He spoke quietly. Hank drove past the station. Kyle's booked. He's in. Bail hearing won't be until morning. Morning's enough time, Grizzly said. Sloan might move faster. Rachel's moving faster. Rope looked toward the back of the diner where Rachel was pacing and talking, her voice still low, but her posture electric with urgency. She's good, he said, a little surprised. Danny's family, Grizzly said. They don't do anything halfway. Danny from behind the counter said without looking up. I heard that, and I'm choosing to take it as a compliment. Lily made a sound. It took Grizzly a half second to identify it because it was so unexpected and so small a sound he had not heard from her yet in all the hours since she'd walked through that door. A laugh, almost inaudible. More of a breath than a sound, but real, genuine. The first crack in the gravity of the night, small enough to close over quickly but bright while it lasted. Danny looked up and caught it, and something in her face went soft and fierce at the same time. Grizzly looked back at Lily. Her expression had already settled back to its careful neutral, but the trace of it was still there, the ghost of something lighter, Something that belonged to a version of her the last 9 years had done their best to bury. Can I ask you something, Lily said. Yes, Grizzly said. What happens to me, specifically, tonight if the judge signs the paper? Where do I go? It was the most practical question she'd asked all night, and it was also underneath the practicality the most frightened one. Not frightened of the answer being bad, frightened of the answer being an unknown. A child who had learned that the unknown space between one bad thing and the next could contain anything. Grizzly looked at Marsh, who had just come off his call. Emergency foster placement, Marsh said, not unkindly but directly because Lily's whole bearing asked for directness. Temporary while the court process moves forward. We have vetted families. I don't want to go somewhere. I don't know, Lily said. Her voice didn't crack, but her hands went flat on the table. I don't want to go somewhere in the dark with people I've never seen. Lily, Marsh started. I'll vouch, Danny said. Everyone looked at her. She had her arms folded and her jaw set, and she was looking at Marsh with the expression of a woman who had made a decision and was not entertaining counterarguments. I have a house 8 blocks from here. I have a room. I have been a licensed foster parent in this county for 11 years. My file is current. My home has been inspected 4 times and passed 4 times, and I have fostered 14 children, and not one of them has ever been unsafe in my care. If the law needs her placed somewhere tonight, she's placed with me. I'm 5 minutes from here, and she knows my face. Do what you need to do to make it official. Marsh stared at her. Danny, he said carefully, the paperwork for emergency placement. I will fill out every piece of paper you put in front of me, Danny said. I will do it right now at this counter in my handwriting with the good pen. But she is not going to a stranger's house in the middle of the night. Her voice was steady and absolute. She's had enough strangers. The room was silent. Lily was looking at Danny with an expression that was almost painful in its carefulness, the expression of someone standing at the edge of something they desperately want and are terrified to reach for because reaching and then falling is worse than never reaching at all. Is that, Lily started, stopped. Would I have my own room? You would, Danny said, with a door that locks from the inside, so you're the one who decides who comes in. Lily's breath caught, just slightly, just enough. Okay, she whispered. Marsh rubbed his face. I'll need to make 2 calls, he said. But yes, I think we can make this work. He stepped away, and Dutch appeared at the table, sliding into the seat across from Grizzly and setting his phone face down in a way that meant he had information he needed to deliver carefully. Grizzly read it and waited. Sloan made a call, Dutch said, his voice low enough that only Grizzly and Jimmy, who had leaned in, could hear. 40 minutes ago. Not to the judge, to someone else. How do you know that? Jimmy said. Dutch looked at him without expression. Jimmy held up his hands. Never mind. Who'd he call? Grizzly said. Guy named Petrov, Dutch said. Victor Petrov. He's got a file with the state. Private investigator license technically, but the license is pretty. What he actually does is, Dutch paused, choosing the word, pressure. He applies pressure to people who are inconvenient, witnesses, plaintiffs, on people who are thinking about testifying. The words settled into the table between them like a stone. He applies pressure, Grizzly said. He's applied it before in ways that put people in the hospital, Dutch said. Nothing ever tied back to Sloan. That's the architecture. Sloan calls Petrov. Petrov makes the problem go away. Nobody can connect them because they don't connect directly. Grizzly looked at Dutch. And Petrov's coming here. He's 3 hours out, Dutch said. Based on where he's known to operate from, which gives us until around 4 a.m., Grizzly said. Give or take. Grizzly sat back. He looked at the room, Rachel on her phone in the back, Marsh making his calls near the door, Danny already pulling papers from somewhere behind the counter. Lily sitting at the table holding her folder, watching his face because his face was the map she was using to navigate the night. He looked at her and he made sure his face showed nothing alarming because she was reading it and he needed her steady. Jimmy, he said quiet. I know, Jimmy said equally quiet. I'll handle it. Don't do anything stupid. When have I ever done anything stupid? You want that list alphabetically or chronologically? Jimmy almost smiled. He got up and moved to Rope and Hank, and the 3 of them went to the back booth and began the specific kind of quiet, concentrated conversation that his crew had over many years learned to have in public without drawing attention. Lily was still watching Grizzly. "Something else is happening," she said. "Yes. Something bad. Something we're handling," he said. "Same way we've handled everything else tonight." She considered that. "You're not going to tell me what it is?" "Not yet," he said, "because right now the most important thing is getting you officially in Danny's care before morning, and I need you focused on that, and I need you not scared of a different thing while we're doing it." She thought about whether she trusted that logic. He could see her thinking. "Okay," she said finally, "but you have to tell me eventually. Everything. I want to know everything." "You'll know everything," and he said. "Promise, promise, Manu." She nodded, and then she did something he didn't expect. She reached across the table, and she put her small, raw-knuckled hand over his, the way he had put his hand over hers earlier in the night, not grabbing, not clinging, just resting. Present. He looked at her hand on his. He looked at her face. She was looking at him with that one open eye, steady and exhausted, and underneath both of those things, something that was fragile in the specific way that new trust is always fragile, easily broken if mishandled, capable of becoming something real and lasting if not. "I know you're scared," she said. He blinked. "What?" "You do this thing," she said, "where you go very still and your jaw gets tight and you look like you're listening to something nobody else can hear. My teacher did that when her mother was sick. She was trying not to be scared in front of us." She paused. "It's okay to be scared. It doesn't mean you're not going to handle it." Colt Harper, who had not been told it was okay to be scared by another person in longer than he could clearly remember, sat very still for a moment. Then he said, "You're 9 years old." "Almost 10, she said. "Of course," he said. And despite everything, the hour, the rain, the man 3 hours away, the judge who might be compromised, the system that had failed her, all of it, something moved through his chest that was improbably close to warmth. Rachel came back from the back of the diner. Her face was different. Grizzly read it immediately. Not good news, but not catastrophe. The middle kind. "Judge Mercer will sign the motion," she said, "but she wants to see the evidentiary file in person. She won't sign off on paperwork she hasn't reviewed directly, which means someone needs to drive to her house with everything we have. In the next 90 minutes. "I'll go," Marsh said. He had his own papers organized. "I need to go with you," Rachel said. "She knows me. She trusts my work." She looked at Grizzly. "That means Lily is here without us for potentially 90 minutes. "We're here," Grizzly said. "Grizzly? 6 of us," he said, "plus Danny, plus Caldwell's protection order. And I'll call Caldwell right now and have a deputy stationed outside. Go, get the signature." Rachel looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Lily. "I'll be back," she said. She said it to Lily, not to Grizzly. "I am coming back. Do you understand me?" Lily looked at her. "Yeah," she said. "I know." Rachel and Marsh went out the door. The bell rang. Their headlights swept the window and faded. The diner settled into a quieter gear, still tense, still watchful, but quieter. Danny was behind the counter doing paperwork, her pen moving steadily. Dutch was in the back booth monitoring his phone. Rope and Hank had positioned themselves without being told near the front of the diner in a way that blocked the sight line to Lily's booth from the windows. Jimmy came back to the table and sat down. He looked at Grizzly. "Petrov won't get to us," he said simply. Grizzly looked at him. "How?" "Let's just say Dutch made a call to someone who knows someone, and Petrov is going to have a very flat tire on Route 60 in about 45 minutes. Jimmy's face was perfectly neutral. "Tragic. These roads." Grizzly held his look for a moment. Then he nodded once. No more needed. Lily had listened to this exchange. She said to Jimmy, "Is Petrov the person who's coming to hurt us?" Jimmy looked at her. He didn't look surprised that she'd caught it. "He was going to try," he said. "He won't make it." She absorbed that. "Because of you." "Because of Dutch, technically." "Why do you do this?" she said. It was the same question she had asked Grizzly in a different form. Not suspicious, genuinely wanting to understand. "You don't know me. You didn't know me 3 hours ago. Why does any of this matter to you?" Jimmy was quiet for a moment. He looked at the table, then he looked up. "You know what the thing is about writing," he said, "about being on the road in a crew for years. You see, a lot of people get left. You see a lot of moments where someone needed something and nobody was there. And after a while, you have a choice. You either get used to that being the way things are, or you decide that when you are there, when you are the person in the room, you don't leave. He shrugged. We're the people in the room tonight. Lily looked at him for a long moment. Your sister, she said softly. The one you lost. What was her name? Jimmy was very still. Maya, he said. I'm sorry nobody was in the room for Maya, Lily said. The diner was quiet enough that the rain on the roof sounded like a conversation. Jimmy's throat worked. He looked away. He looked at the wall, at the chipped Formica counter, at nothing. He blinked once, twice, and then he was steady again, and he turned back to the table and folded his hands and said with controlled gentleness, Yeah, me too, kid, me too. It was 2:15 in the morning when Caldwell called back. Grizzly stepped away from the table to take it. Bail hearings moved up, Caldwell said. His voice was tight. Someone pushed it. It's been rescheduled from 9 a.m. to 6 a.m. Grizzly felt the floor shift. 6 a.m. Someone with pull got to the duty clerk, Caldwell said. I can't prove it yet, but it has Sloane's fingerprints on it. If Kyle's out by 6:37, he could be at the courthouse before Rachel's emergency motion is even heard. Then we need Mercer to sign tonight, Grizzly said. I know, but there's more. A pause, loaded and heavy. The judge who's assigned to the family court docket tomorrow, Judge Harlan, he filed a motion an hour ago to take the Lily Bennett case off the emergency docket and onto the standard one, which pushes it back 5 days. 5 days. Grizzly stood very still. 5 days during which Kyle would be out on bail, during which Sloane would be building, during which Lily, without a finalized court order, would be in a legal gray area that Sloane could exploit every single hour. Grizzly, Caldwell said. His voice had changed. It had something in it that Grizzly had not heard from him all night. Not guilt this time, not fear. Urgency. The urgency of a man who had finally all the way switched sides. I made a mistake tonight when I walked out of this diner and you called me back. I should have said this then. Warren Sloane has something on me, has had it for 6 years. A situation from a long time ago that I handled badly and he found out and he has held it. That's why I didn't push back on Kyle before. That's why I let things slide. A beat. I'm done with that. I'm telling you so you know the whole shape of what you're dealing with. And I am telling the DA's office the same thing tomorrow morning, whatever it costs me. The silence after that was long. Why are you telling me, Grizzly said. Because you're the one who's going to make sure that little girl gets through this, Caldwell said. Not me, not the system, you. And you need to know everything to do it. Grizzly looked through the diner window at the table where Lily sat holding her folder, watching Danny fill out paperwork with the focused attention of a child who had decided that every official piece of paper produced tonight was something to witness and remember. Caldwell, Grizzly said. Mercer, can she move faster? Override Harlan's delay. If she has grounds, Caldwell said. If she has documented evidence of judicial interference in an active child welfare case, is what Harlan did documented. The motion he filed is public record, Caldwell said. The timing of it 1 hour after Sloane's call that's documented in the phone records, which I pulled. Another pause. Warrant came through 20 minutes ago. Kyle's call went to Sloane's office line. Sloane's call to Harlan went to a personal cell. That's in the record now, too. Grizzly closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. Then he opened them. Send everything to Rachel Okafor right now, he said. She's at Judge Mercer's house. Give her everything you just told me. All of it. Already dialing, Caldwell said, and hung up. Grizzly turned around and walked back to the table. He sat down. He looked at Lily. She looked back at him with those careful, steady eyes. What happened? She said. Things got more complicated, he said. And then they got clearer. Is that good? It can be, he said. When you can see what you're dealing with, you can deal with it. It's the things you can't see that are dangerous. She thought about that. Then do you think Rachel's going to get the signature? Yes, he said. Not reassurance, certainty. She leaned back in the booth. She looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at him. I'm tired, man, she said. It came out younger than most of what she'd said all night. Just tired. Just a kid at 2 a.m. who had been running on adrenaline and survival instinct for hours and was finally in the presence of enough warm bodies and locked doors and signed papers and people who were not going anywhere, allowing herself to feel how long this night had been. I know, he said. I can't sleep, though, she said. Not yet. You don't have to, he said. We're here. She nodded. She looked at the folder one more time, reassuring herself it was still there. Then she put her head down on her arms on the table, not lying down, not surrendering, just resting. Her eyes stayed open, watching the middle distance, processing the long, strange shape of this night. Grizzly stayed where he was. Jimmy stayed where he was. Danny wrote her paperwork at the counter, her pen moving in the steady, quiet rhythm of a woman doing something that mattered. And 47 minutes later, Rachel walked back through the door of Mel's diner with her briefcase and her rain jacket and the specific expression of a person who has just won a very fast, very important fight. And she set a signed document on the table in front of Lily and said, Judge Mercer signed everything. Emergency placement with Danny. Injunction against Harlan's delay. And she's referred Harlan to the Judicial Review Board pending investigation of the phone record evidence. She was breathing slightly hard like she'd moved fast to get here. It's done. All of it. The hearing is still 9-1. I'll say Kyle's bail, if it happens, won't change any of this. Lily looked at the document. She put her hand on it. She looked up at Rachel. He can't get me now. Rachel sat down. She looked at this child, at the bruised eye, the split lip, the folder of protective orders held like armor, and she said with absolute precision, not through the courts, not tonight, not without going through every document on that table and the judge who signed them and the record that's been filed in 3 separate offices in the last 2 hours. She leaned forward. You are right now the most documented 9-year-old in Potter County. He cannot touch you without the entire legal weight of everything we did tonight coming down on him simultaneously. Lily stared at her, and then very quietly, very completely, she began to cry. Not the frightened, contained tears of earlier, not the held-back kind. The other kind, the released kind, the kind that comes when the thing you have been holding your whole body against finally moves and the muscles that have been bracing for years get to just for a moment let go. Danny was around the counter in 3 steps. She sat beside Lily in the booth and put her arms around her and didn't say a word because there was nothing to say that was better than just being there. Grizzly watched. He looked at his hands on the table, scarred and large and steady, and he thought about a boy on a staircase in a house that was not safe and a promise made in the dark to no one in particular, and the strange long road that had taken 30 years to arrive at this specific diner, this specific night, this specific child. He had kept the promise. It was enough. For now, it was enough. But tomorrow was coming, and with it a courthouse and a bail hearing, and a man named Warren Sloan who did not lose gracefully and had not lost yet, not fully, not in every way that mattered. The documents were filed, the orders were signed, the pieces were placed. But Kyle Bennett was still breathing, and Sloan was still working, and the morning was still hours away. And in Grizzly's experience, the space between winning and safe was always the most dangerous ground. He looked at the window. He looked at the dark. He stayed where he was. The rain stopped at 3:47 in the morning. Grizzly noticed because the roof of Mel's diner had been a percussion section for hours, and then suddenly it wasn't, and the silence it left behind had weight and texture, and felt in the way that silences sometimes do at the end of long nights, like a held breath. Lily had fallen asleep. Not in a bed, not in a safe room with a locked door. She had fallen asleep right there in the booth, her head on her arms, the folder of protective orders tucked under her cheek, like a pillow she had chosen specifically. Danny had draped a clean tablecloth over her shoulders like a blanket and stepped back and looked at the sleeping child with an expression that had no name in any language Grizzly knew, but that he understood completely. She's out, Jimmy said quietly from beside him. Yeah. Good, she needed it. Grizzly nodded, but he did not relax. Relaxing was not a thing available to him yet because it was 3:47 in the morning, and Kyle Bennett's bail hearing was in 2 hours and 13 minutes, and Warren Sloan did not sleep the way normal people slept. Men like Sloan operated best in the hours when other people's defenses dropped. That was the whole architecture of what they did. Dutch came to his shoulder, spoke low. Petrov turned around, he said. Flat Tire held him for a while. He's heading back toward Lubbock. Whoever called him off. Sloan, Grizzly said. Most likely, which means Sloan knows the legal situation changed. He's pulling back the aggressive play and going to the courtroom play. That's where he's strongest, Grizzly said. Yes, Dutch said. That's where he always wins. Grizzly looked at Rachel, who was at a corner table with her laptop open and 3 legal pads covered in handwriting beside her, still working her coffee untouched and cold beside her. She had been working without stopping since she came back through the door with Mercer's signature. She had the focused, slightly hollow-eyed quality of a person running on purpose alone, and it reminded Grizzly so specifically of certain rides, the ones where you were too far in to stop and too committed to slow down, and the only option was forward full throttle and trust the road. He walked over to her. She looked up. "Talk to me about 6 a.m., he said. She took a breath. Kyle's lawyer, not Sloan, doesn't do bail hearings personally. He'll send an associate, will argue that Kyle is not a flight risk, that he has no prior convictions, that the protection order was issued on the basis of a child's uncorroborated testimony at 1 a.m. without a proper investigation." She said it evenly, like she was reading from a document, like she had already heard it in her head enough times that the emotional charge had burned off and left just the shape of the argument. They'll ask for release on personal recognizance, and they might get it. And if they get it, Kyle is out by 7, she said. He can't approach Lily directly, the protection order holds, but he can call people. He can work. Sloan has until 9 a.m. to file something that delays the custody hearing again, and even with Mercer's injunction, there are procedural moves available to a lawyer with Sloan's experience that could buy days. She paused. What I need is something in the courtroom at 6 a.m. that makes releasing Kyle so publicly, so visibly indefensible, that even a sympathetic judge can't do it without it being the only thing anyone in this county talks about. Grizzly looked at her. What does that mean? It means I need the room full, Rachel said. It means I need people there. Visible people. The kind of presence that tells a judge and a bail commissioner that this decision is being watched by more than just the parties involved. She looked at him steadily. I know what I'm asking. Grizzly looked at the room. His crew, Jimmy, Dutch, Rope, Hank Carver, spread across the booths of a diner at 4 a.m, road-worn and awake, patched and present. We'll be there, he said. Grizzly, a room full of Hell's Angels at a bail hearing, could also be spun as, we'll be there, he said again. No argument in it, just the fact. She looked at him for a moment, then she nodded and went back to her legal pads. He turned around and found Jimmy already looking at him. Jimmy had clearly heard enough. He raised his eyebrows. 6 a.m., Grizzly said. Done, Jimmy said. He looked at the others. Nothing more needed to be said. The crew understood. This was not a new thing showing up being the bodies in the room when the room needed them. It was the oldest thing they did. Danny was standing behind the counter with her arms folded and her chin up. I'm coming too, she said. Danny, don't, she said. Don't you dare tell me to stay here. I filed those foster placement papers 2 hours ago. Lily is technically in my care starting at 6 a.m. this morning when the order kicks in. That makes me a party to this hearing. I have every legal right to be in that room, and I will be in that room. Grizzly looked at her. I wasn't going to tell you to stay, he said. She blinked. Oh, a beat. Good. At 4:15, Lily stirred. She didn't wake all the way. She shifted under the tablecloth, pulled the folder tighter under her cheek, and made a sound that was almost a word and then wasn't and then went still again. Grizzly watched the whole thing from across the diner and felt something he was not going to name move through him slowly. Jimmy appeared beside him. You doing okay, he said. I'm doing fine. You've got that look. What look? The one you get when something's gotten in, Jimmy said, simply without judgment. Grizzly was quiet for a moment. She's 9 years old and she held that paper like it was the most valuable thing she'd ever been allowed to keep, he said. And the thing is, it probably was. Jimmy didn't say anything. She should have had 10 years of things worth keeping, Grizzly said. She should have had a whole house full of them. Yeah, Jimmy said, she should have. They stood there in the quiet diner at 4:15 in the morning, and neither of them said what they were both thinking about, which was a girl named Maya and a boy on a staircase and the specific irreversible nature of time. They didn't have to say it. It was just there the way certain things were always just there between people who had known each other long enough. We're going to get her through this, Jimmy said. Yes, Grizzly said. We are. At 5:30, Grizzly gently woke Lily. She came up from sleep fast, the snap awake of a child who had trained herself not to sleep deeply, whose nervous system had learned that deep sleep was a vulnerability. She was sitting upright and oriented before her eyes were fully open, her hand going immediately to the folder. It's here, Grizzly said. It's right there. She felt it under her hand. She relaxed, fractionally. What time is it? She said, her voice still sleep rough. 5:30. She looked at him, processed. The bail hearing. In 30 minutes. She was quiet for a moment. I can't go, can I? No, he said. You're going with Danny to her house. Rachel arranged for a deputy to be with you there. She looked at the folder, then at him. What if it goes wrong? He held her look. If it goes wrong, Rachel fights, and we back her. And it keeps going until it goes right. That's the whole plan. It doesn't stop. What if he gets out? The protection order doesn't change whether he's out or on, Grizzly said. He comes near you, he's in violation. Caldwell arrests him. It's automatic. That paper doesn't care what a bail commissioner decides. She thought about it. He could see her running the logic, checking for holes. She had a lawyer's mind and a 9-year-old's body, the habit of examining every structure for the place where it could fail. It was a habit born of experience, of having watched every apparent safe thing reveal its breaking point. Okay, she said, and this time the word carried something different than all the other times she'd said it through the night. It carried underneath it the faintest tremor of something that was not just survival, something that was starting cautiously and incompletely to look like hope. She stood up. She was still holding the folder. Danny came around the counter with her coat and her car keys and her purse, and she stood in front of Lily and said, Ready? Lily looked at Grizzly one more time. He held out his hand. She took it and shook it formally, the way she'd seen adults do it, not a child's handshake, a real one, deliberate and serious. I'll see you after, he said. After, she agreed. And she walked out of Mel's diner with Danny's hand on her shoulder, and the folder pressed to her chest, and the bell above the door rang one more time, and she was gone. The Potter County Courthouse at 6 in the morning was not built for crowds. The bail hearing room was a beige box with fluorescent lights and 3 rows of wooden benches designed for the bureaucratic minimum, a commissioner, a defense attorney, a prosecutor, and the interested parties. Maybe 12 people total on a busy day. When the bailiff opened the door at 5:58, there were 43 people in the hallway. Not just Grizzly's crew. In the hours between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m., something had moved through Amarillo, the way things sometimes move through small cities, not by announcement, not by organized effort, but by the particular velocity of a story that is true and that people recognize as true because they have been watching it happen in the background for years without a word to put to it. Danny had a daughter-in-law who was an attorney. Danny had 11 years of foster history in this county. Danny had, in 22 years of working the counter at Mel's, served approximately half of Amarillo, their morning coffee, and listened to their problems with the patient, genuine attention of a woman who actually cared. When Danny's people heard, they came. There were teachers. A woman from Lily's school who had seen a bruise 2 years ago and said nothing and had been living with it and had driven to the courthouse at 5:30 in the morning as an act of penance and witness. There were neighbors. A man from 2 streets over who had heard things through a wall and called it loud television and now stood in a courthouse hallway in his good shirt because it was the only thing he knew how to do, with the weight of it. There were women from Danny's church. There was a reporter from the local paper who had received an anonymous call at 5 a.m. from someone who had Dutch's particular economy of language and was currently taking photographs of the hallway with professional focus. And there were 6 Hell's Angels in their cuts, standing in a row, clean-faced and steady, and not saying a word to anyone because their presence was the statement, and the statement needed no translation. The bail commissioner, a woman named Price, who had been doing this job for 19 years, walked into the hearing room and stopped when she saw the gallery and did a visible recalculation. Kyle's associate, a young man in a gray suit who had the look of someone who had been called very early and was not sure what he had driven into, set his briefcase down at the defense table and turned around and looked at the room and then turned back around and was very still for a moment. Rachel was already at the prosecution table with Marsh beside her, their papers organized, their faces composed, their preparation evident in the specific way that thorough preparation is always evident Not nervousness, but readiness. The readiness of people who know exactly what they have and are not afraid of the other side seeing it. The commissioner called the hearing to order. The associate made his argument. Reliable community member, no prior convictions, protection of the order already in place, release on recognizance. He was good, efficient, and professional, and under normal circumstances, in an empty room he might have gotten it. Rachel stood up. She did not raise her voice. She had the documented phone records of Sloane's call to Judge Harlan submitted into the record. She had Caldwell's sworn statement about his 6-year history of coercion by Sloane submitted into the record. She had Marsh's evidentiary file, Lily's statement, 7 witness affidavits, medical documentation from the hospital where Lily had been taken when she was 6, records that had been filed under accidental injury records that Rachel had pulled and had re-examined by an independent physician at 2 in the morning who had filed a supplementary report stating that the documented injuries were not consistent with the reported cause. She laid it all on the table, piece by piece, quietly, completely. The associate's gray suit seemed to get grayer. Commissioner Price read. She read for 11 minutes. The room was silent enough that the fluorescent lights were audible. Then she looked up. She looked at Kyle, who was sitting at the defense table in the clothes he'd been arrested in, and who had been looking at the gallery at the rows of his neighbors, his town, the bikers, the reporter with the expression of a man who had just fully understood for the first time that the room was not arranged the way it had always been arranged for him. Bail denied, Price said. Mr. Bennett is remanded to custody pending the custody hearing at 9 a.m. this morning, at which time this court will also address the referral of Judge Harlan to the Judicial Review Board and any implications for case assignment. The associate stood up. Commissioner, with respect, denied counselor, Price said with the flat finality of a woman who had made 19 years of decisions and was comfortable with this one. Kyle turned in his chair. His eyes found Grizzly in the gallery, found him specifically in the row in the crowd. His expression was not the calculated performance of the man who had walked into Mel's diner the night before. It was something stripped down and raw and real. It was a man seeing the shape of what had happened to him and understanding it all the way. Grizzly held his look. He didn't lean forward, didn't tighten his chin, didn't perform anything. He just held it steady, and even the way you hold a line when the other end is pulling and you know the rope is good. Kyle looked away first. The second time in 12 hours that someone who thought they were the most powerful person in the room looked at Colt Harper and looked away first. Grizzly noted it without satisfaction. This was not about winning. It had never been about that. The 9 a.m. hearing lasted 58 minutes. Kyle's new attorney, Sloane, had sent someone older and better than the associate, a woman named Gerard, who was formidable and thorough, and arrived with a counter-narrative that was well-constructed and would have been effective 6 months ago or 6 years ago any time before last night, made every argument available to her. She made them well, but she was building on sand because the foundation under her client's story had been documented into the public record piece by piece between midnight and 6 a.m. by a woman in jeans and a sweater who had driven fast and not apologized for it. Judge Mercer, who had been assigned the case after Harlan's recusal under review, heard every argument and then issued emergency permanent placement of Lily Bennett with Danny pending a full custody evaluation. She issued a no-contact order. She ordered a comprehensive review of Lily's case history, including the 2 prior police calls, the CPS contact, and the hospital records. And then she said something that was not typically said in family court rulings, something that went slightly beyond the formal language of legal decisions. And she said it looking at Rachel and at Marsh and at Caldwell, who was also present in his uniform, having chosen to be visible in this room on this morning, regardless of what it cost him. She said, "It is the finding of this court that this child was failed repeatedly by institutions whose purpose was her protection, and that her safety last night was secured not by those institutions, but by private citizens who chose to act when the systems did not. That is noted, and it is the obligation of this court to ensure that the record of those failures is part of the permanent file." The room was quiet. Then Rachel exhaled, just slightly, and Marsh put his pen down on his legal pad and rubbed his face with both hands briefly, and when he took them away, he was composed again, but the effort had shown. Grizzly was standing at the back of the courtroom. He had not been able to sit during the hearing. He'd stood at the back wall with his arms folded and his jaw set, and he had listened to every word and filed every piece of it into the part of his mind that kept the things that mattered. Jimmy was beside him. Jimmy had his eyes closed during the judge's final statement. When it was done, he opened them and looked at the ceiling for a moment, and then looked at Grizzly. "Maya," he said quietly. "Yeah," Grizzly said, "for Maya." They walked out into the morning together. The sun had come out, not dramatically, not in the way that a story might arrange it for effect. Just the ordinary arrival of morning light on a Texas street in April, the kind of light that doesn't care what happened the night before, that comes up the same way regardless. But Grizzly stopped on the courthouse steps and let it hit his face anyway because he was 51 years old, and he had learned slowly and at some cost not to dismiss the ordinary things. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. "Danny," he answered. "She wants to talk to you," Danny said, a rustle. Then, "Did it work?" Lily's voice in his ear over the phone, still sleep rough at the edges, still careful, still measuring. "It worked," he said. A pause. He could hear her breathing. He could hear, in the quality of the silence on her end, the same internal process he had watched all night, the checking, the verifying, the careful testing of whether the thing being offered would hold. "All of it," she said. "All of it," he said. "Permanent placement, no contact, full review." A longer pause. "Then I have my own room." It was not a question. She was saying it to herself as much as to him, placing it in the category of real things, things that existed, things that were hers. "You have your own room," he confirmed. She was quiet for another moment. Then she said, "Can you come to Danny's after?" "Yes," he said. "We'll come." "Okay?" And then very quietly, "Thank you for being in the room." He stood on the courthouse steps in the morning light and he held that sentence for a moment, the weight of it, the specific accuracy of it, the way she had used the exact phrase back to him that he had used the night before without knowing she was going to be the one to return it. "You're welcome," he said, "for being in the room." 3 weeks later, Mel's Diner hosted a breakfast that nobody officially organized, and everybody showed up for anyway. It was early on a Saturday and the tables had been pushed together in the center of the room, and there was enough food on them to feed a construction crew because Danny had been cooking since before dawn, and cooking was what Danny did when she felt things she didn't have words for. Lily sat at the head of the long table in a yellow sweatshirt, bright clean, yellow the real kind, and she was eating pancakes with syrup and talking to Dutch about something that was making Dutch laugh, which was notable because Dutch laughed approximately 4 times per year, and it was only March. Rachel was there with her husband, Danny's son, a quiet man who had looked at Lily the first time he met her and immediately begun rearranging his schedule to be home more. Marsh was there off the clock in a flannel shirt that made him look like a different person. Caldwell was there in plain clothes, looking like a man who had recently set down something heavy and was still adjusting to the feeling of not carrying it. The crew was there, all of them. Grizzly sat at the other end of the long table and he watched Lily laugh at something Dutch said, and he felt the specific, complete feeling of a thing that had been done right, not perfectly, not without damage, not without cost, but done. Real, solid, something that would hold. Lily looked down the table at him. She picked up her fork and pointed it at him with the solemn comic gravity of a child making an official declaration. "Best pancakes I've ever had," she said. "You've had 3 helpings," he said. "That's how you know they're the best." He looked at her, in the yellow sweatshirt, with the syrup on her chin that she hadn't noticed yet, and the laugh that was still new and careful but getting more real every day. With the dark eyes, both of them open now, the left one healed, the swelling gone, and the mind that had been built for survival and was slowly and with great deliberateness being offered the chance to build itself for something else. He picked up his coffee cup. She picked up her orange juice. Across the length of a table full of the improbable and accidental family that one stormy night had assembled, they held them up at the same time, a small private toast acknowledged and complete. Some promises take 30 years to keep. Some doors open in a storm at midnight, and on the other side of them is the reason you made the promise in the first place. Colt Harper had been in the room. This time he had not been nobody. And Lily Bennett, who had walked through the worst night of her life on a broken shoe in the pouring rain and pushed open a door full of strangers because she would rather be dead out there than dead in there, was sitting in the morning light eating her 4th pancake, and she was safe. Not almost safe. Not temporarily safe. Not safe until the next thing. Safe.